This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries, the story of an undercover cop who allegedly went wrong. On the day of his trial, he fled into the Louisiana swamps, and his fellow officers believe he is playing a lethal game of hide and seek. According to history and Hollywood legend, the notorious outlaw Billy the Kid was gunned down by his friend Sheriff Pat Garrett in 1881. Recent evidence suggests that Garrett killed the wrong man. In 1987, Donald Smith, accompanied by a mysterious hitchhiker, had a tearful reunion with his long-lost daughter. The next day, both men vanished. These intriguing stories all need one final clue, one final piece of information before they can be solved. Perhaps someone watching tonight can help. Perhaps it's you. May the 16th, 1987, Denver, Colorado. At 2 o'clock in the morning, two vehicles collided on a downtown street. One driver fled the scene, abandoning his pickup truck. A few minutes later, when police arrived to investigate the scene of the accident, they made a thorough search of the abandoned pickup truck. Inside, they found a bloody jack handle and a room key from a local motel. Police went to the motel and discovered that the driver of the abandoned vehicle was registered there under the name of Larry Monroe.
I think we might have what we're looking for, guys.
In his room, they found a pair of pants and a sweatshirt, both covered with blood.
Still fresh.
Denver police tracked the abandoned pickup truck to a white man named Donald Smith from Hemet, California. Yet the driver who ran from the collision in Denver was black. Police could get no information at all about the man who registered at the motel under the name of Larry Monroe, but they were able to check out Don Smith. They found that Smith's wife had not heard from him for 12 days, ever since he left home to begin a cross-country trip. What started out as a simple traffic accident would soon turn into a bizarre murder, a murder that police are still trying to solve. Don Smith, the owner of the abandoned vehicle, lived with his second wife in Hemet, a small town in Southern California. He'd been feeling despondent because he was not well enough to work. So he decided to drive cross-country to visit relatives. Smith left Hemet on May the 11th, 1987, driving the pickup truck and towing a trailer. He was accompanied only by his 2 Labrador retrievers. Don was anxious to visit his daughter Brenda in Idaho. Brenda was the only child from Don's first marriage. For most of her life, she and her father had been kept apart.
My mother kept me away from my father. They didn't get along real well after the divorce, and I think I only saw him like once up until the time my mother died, and then I started searching for him. He was searching for me as well.
When Brenda was 26 years old and herself a divorced mother of 2, she and her father were finally and joyfully reunited.
Oh, it was a really good relationship. It was almost like we had always known each other. You know, it was real close. I could tell him anything. You know, he was very protective of me. And if anyone ever, you know, if I ever had a problem, he said, you know, just let me know. I'll take care of it for you. You know, he was kind of a macho man, I guess. Basically, it was a real good relationship. With the exception of when my father drank, which he didn't do very often, you know, thank God. He turned into kind of a different person when he was drunk.
The day after Don Smith left Hemet, he and another man pulled up in front of the hospital where Brenda worked as a psychiatric nurse. Smith stayed in the truck, but his companion got out and walked into the hospital.
Hi, I'm looking for Brenda Walker.
She's not working today. I could probably connect you with the supervisor, okay?
The receptionist referred the man to Brenda's supervisor, John SLANE.
Yeah, this is John.
Well, I'm looking for Brenda Walker.
She's not here today. Who is this, please?
A friend of her father's, and I need to get in contact with her.
I can't give you that information over the phone. I'll tell you what, why don't I meet you out in the parking lot?
Okay, great.
SLANE went outside to talk to Don Smith.
Hi, you're Brenda's dad?
Yeah, where's my baby girl, Brenda?
Yeah, he was obviously been drinking. And he said, you know, where's Brenda at? And I said, well, she's fishing with her girlfriend. The guy that was driving, he leaned over, you know, to get the directions. Once I explained to him how to get out to the one intersection, he seemed to know where that was.
Just 15 miles away, Brenda and her friends had given up fishing and stopped by a saloon near the lake. The three of them were having a drink at the bar.
We're sitting there at the bar near the window by the front door. The door opened, and everyone in the bar turned around. There was a black man that had come in, and he closed the door. He had sunglasses on, took the sunglasses off, and looked around for a few minutes. I think he was probably allowing his eyes to adjust to the darkness. Then he walked into the restroom, and about probably a minute later, this man came in with wild hair, and his shirt was untucked.
Hi, is there Brenda Walker in here?
Hi, Dad. It took me a minute to really realize who he was. It was my father.
I missed you so much.
He looked so different from the last time I saw him. And he hugged me and sat at the bar with me for a minute, and I realized that he was drunk. And I went into the restroom. I was a little upset because he had showed up drunk, and it kind of embarrassed me in front of my friends.
She's such a sweetheart. I sure missed her.
I went into the restroom. I came back out.
You okay?
How about you?
I want to be with you so much.
And he starts crying immediately. And he's babbling, and he's talking about how he doesn't want to be alive anymore and how he's got cancer, and he was going to be with my mother in heaven. And then his companion came out of the restroom.
Hey, they don't serve whiskey in here.
The black man just kept on walking. You know, he kind of looked over at my father and then just kept walking like he didn't really know who he was. Kind of ignored him a little bit and went out and got into the truck and got into the driver's seat of my father's truck. I kept looking out the window at him, you know, and he'd sit there and he had his, you know, his head leaning on the steering wheel, staring out at the lake. And I don't know, he looked real impatient, looked disgusted with being there.
I'm just sorry. Oh, God. I found your life up for all these years.
Yeah, I don't want to hear you cry. I don't want to hear this. Why don't you just go get a motel room, sober up, and then come back and talk to me tomorrow about it.
Anyone want to fight in here? Let's go. I can whip anyone in here.
When her father became belligerent, Brenda walked out of the saloon. After a few minutes, Brenda's father followed her outside, but she left without speaking to him.
I wish that I would have had more patience with him. I wish I would have understood his situation. I wish I would have, you know, tried to be more compassionate with him. It was the last time I saw him. He opened up the camper and let the dogs out and let them run around. And I just drove away.
Yes, I do.
2 weeks later, in the high desert outside Twin Falls, Idaho, a couple out for their morning walk made a horrible discovery. Police were called in to remove and identify the dead body.
We observed a body that appeared to have been thrown over the guardrail, laying down. The body was decaying for approximately 2 weeks. We could not recognize him at that point. There was no identification found around him or on him. At this time, we had no idea who we had. We just had another John Doe. An autopsy was done, and we found bludgeon marks on the back of the head, indicating cause of death was by bludgeon. Also, outside of the guardrail, where possibly the victim was thrown from, we found a sack with a bottle of wine in it. It was just taken as evidence. It wasn't until we had the body identified that it all started fitting in to the crime scene.
The Twin Falls Sheriff's Department had no idea who the body was until they heard about the two-car collision in Denver, where the driver of the pickup truck had fled the scene.
Hey! Hey!
The Denver police discovered the abandoned vehicle belonged to Don Smith. They issued a possible homicide bulletin.
Denver police had sent out a teletype indicating that they had a vehicle involved in an accident that possibly was involved in a homicide. So I called the Denver Police Department, and they gave me the name of a subject, Donald Smith.
Fingerprints from the dead man in Twin Falls positively identified the body as Donald Smith. Police began to piece together the events that led up to Don Smith's murder. On May 11th, the very day Smith left home, he ran into trouble with the trailer he was towing. Just outside Las Vegas, he arranged to leave his trailer with a local man. One theory is that soon after Smith left Las Vegas, he picked up a hitchhiker. At some point along the way, Smith started drinking. The day after he saw his daughter Brenda, Don Smith turned up in Park City, Utah.
I need to have you send me some money so I can...
He called his sister in Vancouver, asking her to wire him money.
50.
That same day, Smith picked up $200. He was accompanied by a man who looked exactly like the one Brenda had seen with her father in the bar. Police theorize that the hitchhiker Smith had picked up murdered him when Smith stopped to let his dogs out for a run.
Come on, boy. Come on.
The murder weapon was probably a jackhandle, grabbed from the rear of Smith's pickup truck. Police suspect that the man dumped Smith's body in the high desert, where it was found over 2 weeks later.
I want to know why he killed my father. I want to know why he took my father away from me and away from my children. My father was the only family I had.
This composite of Don Smith's mysterious companion was compiled from various eyewitness accounts. He is black, but with relatively light skin and probably in his 30s. He stands around 6 feet tall and weighs about 180 pounds. He may use the name Larry Monroe and may once have lived in the area of Blackfoot, Idaho. Next, the story of Billy the Kid, notorious outlaw and a legend of the West. Was he really killed by Sheriff Pat Garrett, or did he live to the ripe old age of 91? The legendary Billy the Kid, easily the most notorious desperado of the wild, wild West. He killed 21 men, one for every year of his life.
Recognize that Palomino over there? The one without the whiskers is Billy the Kid. Billy the Kid?
In 1941, Buster Crabbe played the role in one of over 250 movies made about the famous outlaw. Hollywood had started a legend. Traditional wisdom tells us that Billy the Kid was born William Bonney in New York City in 1859. He fought against the rich ranchers in the Lincoln County Cattle War and was given a death sentence for killing Sheriff William Brady. According to history and the movies, in 1881, Billy the Kid was hunted down by Sheriff Pat Garrett, who tracked him to Fort Sumner, New Mexico. Billy was hiding in the home of a friend, Pete Maxwell. Unaware of Garrett's arrival, he went out back to wash up. Garrett crept into Maxwell's house to ambush Billy. He was eager to collect the $500 reward that had been offered for Billy the Kid's death. History tells us that Billy was buried the following day in a simple grave. But history may be wrong.
This whole legend of Billy the Kid was absolutely no truth. 90% of what we have heard and been taught as students in schools is not true.
68 years later, the Hollywood legend was turned upside down when in 1950, a 91-year-old man from Hyco, Texas, named Brushy Bill Roberts, came out of obscurity and alleged that he was Billy the Kid. Despite a massive controversy, his claim still stands.
There is no doubt whatever in my mind but what Brushy Bill and Billy the Kid was one and the same person.
Historian Donald LAVASH disagrees.
There is absolutely no comparison whatsoever between Brushy Bill Roberts, known as Ole Partridge Roberts, and William Bonney, alias Billy the Kid.
While the rest of America believes the Hollywood legend of Billy the Kid, in Hyco, Texas, the tiny community of 1,300 is absolutely certain the famous outlaw was really Brushy Bill Roberts. Many historians scoff at Brushy Bill's story, but William Tunstill's belief that Brushy Bill really was Billy the Kid cannot be dismissed out of hand. There is evidence that supports this claim. And if that claim is true, then this chapter in the history of the American West may have to be rewritten. In 1948, a Florida attorney, William Morrison, first uncovered evidence that Billy the Kid did not die in 1881. A client told him that years ago he had actually fought Billy the Kid in the Lincoln County Wars, and that the kid was still alive.
And as my father was talking to the man, he referred to Lincoln County. My father said, oh, he said, that's where Billy the Kid, he said, he was killed up there at Pete Maxwell's house. And the man said, oh, no, he wasn't killed. He's still around.
Fascinated, Morrison crisscrossed the West talking to other old-timers about Billy the Kid. He discovered that many thought that Billy was indeed still alive, quietly living under the name Brushy Bill. Finally, in 1949, Morrison made the trip to Hyco, Texas, to confront Brushy in person and ask him if the rumors were true.
Brushy Bill here. Nice to meet you in person.
I am Billy the Kid. Come on in. We'll talk about this a little further.
We must keep in mind that this man did not seek publicity. He did not seek to come out from seclusion. He was drawn out.
Come on in.
Brushy Bill wanted Morrison's help in finally getting the pardon that was promised to him in 1879 by the governor of New Mexico for turning state's
I
evidence.
expect a full pardon out of this. So when I die, why, my slate will be clean.
Well, I'll help you if I can, but you have to be able to prove to me you are who you say you are.
I can do that. I've still got the scars, and I didn't get these sitting around in no rocking chair.
The scars seem to match the reported wounds received by the kid during his short-lived outlaw career.
This one here, on my shoulder, is from a knife wound down south of the border. I'm really not too proud of that.
There were 17 points of identification of similarity between the two. Both men had small hands and large wrists, protruding teeth, protruding ears, blue eyes, same head size, same boot size, and the weight.
There's no record anywhere where there's anything having to do with a boot size of Billy the Kid, a waist size of Billy the Kid, or a hat size of Billy the Kid, nothing. But it does tell us something about his eyes. This reporter states unequivocally, without question, that they were clear blue eyes. Brushy Bill had speckled eyes.
Some of these spots is still fresh in my memory. Right over that hill there, we used to camp out.
In 1950, Brushy Bill took Morrison on a guided tour of the kid's former haunts in Lincoln County. Morrison died in 1976, but he told his daughter about the trip.
Brushy Bill would give incidents that only someone that was actually involved in the Lincoln County War would have known. My father became convinced that this man was, Brushy Bill Roberts was actually Billy the Kid.
Morrison then contacted 5 people who had known Billy the Kid during the Lincoln County War. Each of them separately met Brushy Bill in person. All 5 witnesses signed sworn affidavits stating that Brushy Bill Roberts was indeed Billy the Kid. If Brushy Bill really was Billy the Kid, one nagging question remains. What really happened on July 14th, 1881 in Fort Sumner? According to Brushy Bill, on the night of the shooting, he was with his girlfriend Celsa and his partner Billy Barlow at Jesus Silva's house. These are the precise words Brushy Bill used in his testimony to William Morrison to describe the events of that fateful night.
Silva said if one of us would go next door and get beef, he would cook it for us. I sensed a trap.
You go. Me? Yeah.
He started out after I refused to leave the house. I thought that Garrett might still be in town, and I wanted to meet him in the daytime so I could beat him to it.
Unknown to the Kid, Garrett and his posse had taken cover across the yard.
One of their first shots had killed my partner. I ran out into the yard. I ran through the gate and started shooting at shadows along the house. The first shot struck me in the lower jaw. Another struck me in the shoulder, and then another struck me across the top of my head. When I woke up, a Mexican woman was putting beef tallow on my head to stop the blood. I told her to reload my .44. Then Celsa came running in and said they'd killed Barlow and were passing off his body as mine. She begged me to leave town.
Brushy claims that the next day, Billy Barlow was buried in his place.
In a normal procedure, the sheriff would have brought the corpse to a place for anyone to witness. He would have demonstrated his guns, his clothing, his boots, his rifle. Pat Garrett did not follow that procedure. He took every precaution to conceal the identity of the corpse. He realized he had killed the wrong man.
Pat Garrett enlisted some 21 people that purportedly knew William Bonney. And they assembled, passed by the casket, and said, yes, that's William Bonney, Billy the Kid, in that casket.
By 1950, Morrison felt he had gathered enough evidence to request a pardon from Governor Mabry of New Mexico. He agreed to meet them in person.
Brushy Bill was very nervous. He saw some deputies standing there, and they had guns in their holsters.
How do we know you're not an imposter?
This is a man, 91 years old, did not want to hang. And they were all saying, if he is Billy the Kid, he's an outlaw, he's a criminal. You don't pardon him, you hang him.
The interview turned into a press circus. 90-year-old Brushy was confused and scared by the reporters, historians, and even Pat Garrett's relatives.
Brushy, who's buried in that grave if Pat Garrett didn't kill Billy the Kid?
How many aliases have you had all these years?
Governor Mabry, do you really intend to give this man a pardon?
I am taking no action now or ever on this application for a pardon for Billy the Kid because I do not believe this man to be Billy the Kid.
The governor never even gave him a chance to present the evidence by just flat out telling him he wasn't even going to consider it.
Morrison's legal arguments and affidavits were not even entered into evidence. Brushy Bill felt he had been humiliated, his claims ridiculed. His pardon was not granted. Shortly after the meeting with Governor Mabry, Brushy Bill suffered a heart attack and died on a street in Hyco, Texas.
All he wanted was to have his name cleared. That's all he was trying to do, giving back his dignity. I have no doubts in my mind at all. And the more I get into my father's papers, the more I get into his records, the more I read, no one would ever convince me the man was not, Brushy Bill was not Billy the Kid.
Brushy Bill's friends and neighbors have erected a memorial to Brushy Bill Roberts, which reads, "He spent the last days of his life trying to prove to the world his true identity. We believe his story and pray to God for the forgiveness he solemnly asked for." On a previous broadcast, we examined the strange disappearance of Angelo Desideri, a 58-year-old businessman who lived in a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. On the morning of Monday, June 6, 1988, Angelo failed to open his gift shop. Concerned, his friends called the police. They arrived at Angelo's house and discovered it undisturbed. It appeared that Angelo had been interrupted while preparing a mid-afternoon meal. A neighbor fueled police suspicion when he said he had seen Angelo's Cadillac speed off the Sunday he disappeared.
It was very difficult to see. Of course, I couldn't see any facial characteristics, and it just appeared to be a person taller than Angelo. It wasn't like Angelo to pull out without acknowledging me.
At 6:32 on Monday evening, 30 hours after Angelo disappeared and 400 miles away from Phoenix, a 1985 Cadillac was found ablaze in a San Diego parking lot. Gasoline had been used to set the fire. Investigators traced the owner of the car. It belonged to Angelo Desideri.
We looked in the trunk and found absolutely nothing in that trunk that would have been there other than the jack. No carpet, no padding, no spare tire. Basically, this tells us that there could have been something in the vehicle that was transported in the vehicle, and when it was taken out, they took the carpet and the padding and wrapped it all in one unit and took everything out of the vehicle, including the spare tire.
For over 8 months, investigators and friends were baffled as to the motive for Angelo's disappearance. Update. On March 16th, Phoenix police charged a local resident, Joe Callow, with conspiracy to commit armed robbery and burglary on Angelo Desideri. They learned that Callow was a friend and business associate of Angelo and had detailed information concerning his disappearance.
Joe Callow told us that all the information he had was told to him by James Majors.
James Majors had worked with Callow in construction. He is currently in a California jail facing several counts of murder.
During the interview of Joe Callow, he stated that Majors went to the house, got into the house by ringing the doorbell and asking for a glass of water. Then took Angelo at gunpoint and robbed the house. He was taken out of the house at that time by Majors and driven out into the desert.
Callow claims that somewhere between Phoenix and San Diego, Majors murdered Angelo and then placed the body in the trunk of the Cadillac and continued on towards San Diego.
The following morning, Majors goes to a hardware store. We're not sure where. We believe it's in some small town between here and California, where he purchased a pick and a shovel.
Callow claims that after buying the tools, Majors told him that he had driven down a desert back road to an area adjacent to a rundown house. He then buried Angelo near a large tree.
According to Callow, Majors did a real unique thing. And that is, as he's leaving the gravesite, he stopped and gave the shovel and the pick to the poor people that lived in that shack. And then he exited onto the highway and drove into California.
Joe Callow also told investigators that Majors had a storage locker. Police searched the locker and recovered property belonging to Angelo. These items were traced back to the Desideri home. Next, the story of Charles Muley, a model policeman, or so his partners thought. In reality, Charles Muley is an accused child molester and wanted fugitive. Surrounded by swamps and bayous, Slidell, Louisiana lies on the outskirts of New Orleans. Slidell is a conservative community, an unlikely setting for a shocking series of crimes that ended in a local motel room over 4 years ago. On the evening of March 1st in 1985, 36-year-old Charles Muley escorted a 12-year-old girl to his rented room. Moments later, police arrested Muley. They charged him with a sexual molestation of a minor. The authorities knew the suspect well. Charles Muley was a fellow police officer. In fact, he was a sergeant in charge of sexual offenses at the Slidell Police Department. The young girl was a child he was counseling. One of the most wrenching things that can face law enforcement officers is when one of their own goes bad. Charles Muley's arrest outraged his former partners. They found it hard to believe that one of their own could have betrayed the public trust in such a shocking fashion. But the evidence was all too convincing. Because of the nature of these offenses, we've used actors to portray the 12-year-old victim and her family. We've also changed their names.
Hey, man. Yeah, what can I do for you? I'm looking for some smoking dope.
Sergeant Muley was a highly regarded undercover officer at Slidell's Police Department. In 1983, he was chosen as Slidell's Police Officer of the Year. Muley was so adept in his undercover disguises that he once arrested the same felon 3 different times without being recognized.
Take it easy. Sheriff's office, you're under arrest. Up against the truck.
After his transfer to the Sexual Molestation Detail in 1981, he was assigned to the case of a 12-year-old girl who'd been upset by the advances of an older boy.
My daughter and a friend of hers in the neighborhood had come to me complaining about a boy who had been harassing them very badly in the neighborhood. And I talked to the other girl's mother, and we both decided it might be a good idea to call the police station to report this boy.
So all you're really going to be doing is talking to Sergeant Muley. Now, he's probably going to ask you a few questions.
Finally did appear at the police station. And that was the first encounter we had with Sergeant Muley.
We're the Josephs.
Oh, Sergeant Muley.
Hi.
How you doing, folks? You must be Claire. Well, come on in.
I had no reason not to trust him. I never regarded him as anything but a policeman. Sergeant Muley, a policeman.
If you folks don't mind, you can sit out here.
Muley not only deceived the parents, but his fellow officers had no idea of his activities.
And I worked most of the sex crime cases that were reported to the Slidell Police Department at that time, adult and juvenile. We saw each other, of course, every day. We worked cases together. I thought he handled himself very professionally. When I worked with him, I thought Charlie was a pretty good policeman.
Well, folks, I think I've got this figured out. And we may have a problem. I don't want you to be too concerned. I'm going to have to interview your daughter. I'm going to have to interview the boy again.
Later on, when he would call the house about her, he would say, "Why don't you bring her down here? And you don't need to wait. It's ridiculous for you to sit there and wait." And I said, "Okay." No sooner had I turned the block, he was leaving the police station with her, walking past other policemen, put her in the car, and they would leave.
Muley took the young girl to a motel room that he had reserved for undercover work.
Our daughter, she started changing. I knew that something was bothering my daughter because she would say, "Daddy, don't look at me."
The girl stated that Muley had been seeing her for 4 months. Finally, she could no longer take the emotional strain. She told her parents what had been occurring.
And all I could keep saying was over and over in my mind was, I can't believe that he did this. I remember her telling me how relieved she was to get it all out.
In order to gather more incriminating evidence, police, in consultation with a reluctant Joseph family, asked the 12-year-old girl to make one more rendezvous with Muley. This time, the motel room would be used as a trap with a hidden video camera to secure just enough evidence for prosecution.
Sheriff's office, freeze. You're under arrest.
Before the girl could be compromised, Muley was arrested by his fellow officers and booked for child molestation.
Bend over a little bit.
Come on here.
I received a phone call that Charlie had been arrested and charged with molestation of a juvenile. And I was flabbergasted. I didn't know how to act. I really didn't. I was sick on my stomach. I thought it was somehow a mistake because I'd known him for a long time, and this was nothing in his personality that I ever saw. Having to investigate another policeman, especially one that I had been partners with, was the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't know what else to say. It was the hardest thing that I've ever done. Okay, Mom's gonna be here in a little while. I'm gonna go to my office up here, okay? I was mad.
What school do you go to?
I was unhappy.
You like school? Yes.
I'm mad now.
We're gonna go right up here to the office in the corner, okay? Okay.
We're gonna record our conversation, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about Charlie Muley. One of those questions will be, how did you come to meet him?
My mom and Dad brought me to the police station, and that's how.
It was probably the hardest statement I ever took.
Did you see him after?
It was hard for me to sit there and listen to that child say some of the things she said.
Yes.
Would he talk to you or to your mom?
To me.
And what would he say when he called?
He would say to make up a story to my mom or Dad, and he would meet me somewhere.
Officer Porter began to go through Muley's personal files. She was hoping that the alleged molestation of the girl was an isolated incident. Apparently, it was not.
If Your Honor, please, considering the serious gravity of these offenses...
On September 27, 1985, Charles Muley was indicted on over 25 counts relating to the molestation and rape of 6 young girls.
The fact that the defendant has no prior record in his service to the community in the past.
Muley was released on $150,000 bail. He adamantly denied all of the charges. Eight months later, on May 11, 1986, Muley was reported missing. It was the morning of his trial. 2 days later, his pickup truck was found abandoned on the Pass Manchac Bridge. The initial assumption was that he had taken his life rather than face the ordeal of a public trial.
I was one of the first officers to show up at the scene when the truck was located. It was my gut feeling at that time that no, he had not jumped, had not committed suicide. Of course, you have to go on more than gut feeling, so we had to drag the lake.
The Sheriff's Department spent several days searching the Bayou Manchac Lake in the hopes of finding Muley's body. Tributaries and backwaters were also searched. as there was a chance the body might have washed ashore. Nothing was found. 2 days later, an anonymous phone call was made to the sheriff's department. The person told them that a suicide note signed by Muley had been left in a service station restroom 5 miles away from where the pickup had been found. The letter read, in part, "I was not guilty of any of these charges. They have persecuted me for no reason. Please forgive me for what I have done."
There's no way you can convince me that Charlie Muley committed suicide. I do not believe that at all. I did not believe it the day the note was found. I did not believe the note at all. I believe that the note was part of the game that Charlie's playing, and he's been playing since he left here, whatever the rest of it is.
The day after the discovery of the suicide note, a fisherman believed he saw Muley emerging from the swamp. This was closely followed by another sighting. In this case, the witness was fired upon by a man dressed in hospital clothes, a favorite outfit of Muley's.
Hey, how you doing?
Individual shot at you the other day, and I'd like for you to just...
Later, when he made his report to the police, he picked out Charles Muley as the person who shot him.
That's him right there.
That's number 5.
We were convinced more than ever that Charles was alive, that he was in this area and he had not moved far from this area.
Almost 2 years after Muley's disappearance, another anonymous tip led police to a trailer near a local swamp. They had been told that Muley was inside.
Clear. Clear on this end.
Okay, he ain't gonna be here. We missed him.
Authorities believe that Muley was tipped off by some of his former police associates.
I think somebody told him we were coming in the law enforcement community. I think they notified him that we were looking at him, that we were close to him, and then he ran.
Of course, Charlie was a policeman, too. So he is aware of the way policemen handle a case, surveillance, and so forth and so on. Charlie did a lot of surveillance.
Looking back at it now, I think that he enjoyed working undercover so much that right now he's just playing an undercover game. But now it's real for him. Before he was playing the police officer, working undercover, but now he has to go undercover. So I think he's enjoying it.
Almost 3 years have passed since Muley disappeared. Police believe he may be hiding in the swampland near Slidell, living a solitary, Rambo-like existence.
I think Charlie enjoys the thrill of the chase. He enjoys the game. And Charlie always needs to win the game. I don't want him to win this time. He doesn't have the right to win this time.
Update. Charles Muley has been captured. Within minutes of our July broadcast, the FBI received several calls from viewers who reported that Muley was living in Ocala, Florida, 30 miles south of Gainesville, under the assumed name Joseph John Tranchina. Muley had seen our broadcast and left the Ocala area for approximately 3 weeks. When he returned on August 3rd, he was arrested by FBI agents and Marion County, Florida Sheriff's deputies. For every mystery, there is someone, somewhere, who knows the truth. Perhaps that someone is watching. Perhaps it's you.